Okay, everybody. It is the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We are recording this session about the Niagara 4 e-signature application. My name is Kyle Sardinia. I'm a sales engineer with Tridium. So to get started, I want to talk about what's new up front because the application has been around now for 4 years or so. So just out of the gate, want to talk about the new update. We're very excited about the new release, a lot of enhancements and a lot of improvements that were added to the new versions that came out. And then I'm going to take a step back and talk about what is it for somebody who might be new or hasn't used or needs a refresher. Talk about ways to get started, and then really kind of get into the application itself in Workbench, show what it is, what it isn't, and try to get everybody a better understanding of what the e-signature application actually provides you. So if you aren't familiar, we released version 2.3 of e-signature application. It is available for download on Niagara Central for partners who have access. There is a zip release that includes the new modules. So for the long-term supported 4.10, you have the build there for the 4.11 version that's out. And for the new general availability of 4.12 was released last month. So we have support for all of these versions now. They are all part of that download release. Also, you can now find the Niagara e-signature application on Niagara Marketplace. So the relaunch of Niagara Marketplace has a lot of third-party modules that you can check out as well. But the e-signature application is another one you can throw in your host ID, choose your amount of points you want, and get going that way. We also updated the training for version 2.3. If you want to go to tridiumuniversity.com, you can see the self-paced e-signature certification that's published in Tridium University. With version 2.3, we added a few different features that were definitely requested, necessary to make things easier on our partners. So we took a lot of what our customer said and threw that in. First of all and foremost being LDAP authentication support. Instead of just using the user database for Niagara, you can now use LDAP users to actually authenticate points. Multiple zones are now available to configure. 4.12 obviously was a big one for us, getting that out the door. Switching those non-user logged in users to authenticate really enables kind of a kiosk mode to change over the shoulder for different users to use the same machine if they're accessing an open system, to be able to make those authentications. A few things like having that secondary level authentication, having a request persist through a reboot. We added support for that. The ability to now, when their point chooser can select multiple points to unsecure and resecure at once, and to be able to clear non-secured point selection in that point chooser window. There are also some of the remote request enhancements we made to the ability to have that level 2 authentication. There's some new views as far as when you log in, when you see the request, and refreshing those requests based on how fresh or how recent they are. And then also the ability now to send email notifications to remote users for those second level users. You don't just have to either know or be in the room. The legal statement that is provided when signing points is now able to be manipulated. So if any lawyers out there say, hey, this is not the right language for signing these points, you can write whatever they like. And as well as now there's a slot for showing those pending remote requests. A lot of alarm acknowledgement enhancements, adding histories of alarm acknowledgements using authentication, and selecting those reasons and adding and toggling between the single and dual alarm acknowledgement. So just those are the highlights for 2.3 if you're a returning user. But just to take a step back, what is it in general? The Niagara 4 e-signature application was a little bit of history going back to, I think, 2018, late 2017. A customer contracted professional services. It was a pharmaceutical manufacturing type application that required this validation and the ability to enforce certain things to comply with a specific specification or code from the FDA. Specifically, we lacked a mechanism for electronic signatures. So what the application entails is the ability to link those electronic records to an individual user using an electronic signature. So it creates this audit log, and it makes sure that everything is accurate. There's stamped data, and it's linked to signatures. So anytime a manual change or intervention or a set point manipulation, something is in Niagara, the e-sign application ensures that all of the following parameters are in place, that it is authorized, that the user has access to specific points within the system, so that individual is authorized, and it is documented. It has to be logged in these uneditable audit files to prove that trail, and it needs to include a reason for change. So why you are making that change needs to be documented as part of that same audit log, according to the literature, or not literature, but specification. And we also added the secondary level feature that you can have 2 people sign off. That's not really included in the FDA spec, as far as having multiple levels of people. We added that secondary manager you can add optionally for extra validation. So within Niagara, you can have points that are e-sign secured, so that every time you go to manipulate, you have to re-enter your username and password, sign the point, and it will create in that secure point history the reason for change, who did it, why, what the old and new values are, or you can leave points alone. So if there's areas in the same system that don't need to be as secure, and just changing a thermostat in a lobby or something, you don't want to have 2 people sign off every single time. These can exist in the same system, but we just restrict such things through category services, role services, user service. Make sure whoever has access to the specific points that need to be validated are performed with authentication, and that'll kind of with authentication will make sense in the application. So it is an extension of Niagara 4 framework. It's not a dashboard that's pre-configured for you. It is a series, it's a suite of tools, it's a suite of jar files that are loaded into Niagara 4 to be able to configure validated systems. So there's this graphical environment to program the application that a lot of system integrators are familiar with. The user is then configured to authenticate against those secure points. So there are checks in place to make sure that the users can access specific points in the Niagara application. And then the customer information is linked to those users. So you could set up all the customer information, the zones, where the secured points are within the application. Just wanted to also pull out this subpart of the Code of Federal Regulations, Part 11, about what is an electronic record, and then what is an electronic signature, as they have to be linked. So really, it's written very vague, in my opinion. I think intentionally so, to say any sort of combination of text, graphics, data, audio, pictorial, and information that is created, modified, maintained, archived, retrieved, or distributed by a computer system. All right, so all those, when there's a manipulation of that data, there needs to be an electronic signature, which is a computer data compilation of any symbols or a series of symbols. And it's supposed to be equivalent to an individual's handwriting signature. There, the specification also says, 2 unique identifying figures. This can be an individual's name and a password. So in Niagara, you can add much more things like a phone number, an email address, whatever job title they have that might be linked to specific areas within the system. Whatever metadata about them only ensures who's using the system should be. So who's it for, really? I keep saying the FDA's 21 CFR Part 11, but really it's any validated system, anything that needs an additional authorization check. So Niagara does have, a secure digest authentication mechanism to actually get into the application. But then when you're going to the individual points that you want to provide, just having those electronic signatures executed that are linked to those records, including that meaning and reason for change. So any sort of manufacturing practice could use this, anyone who's subjected to the Food and Drug Administration's Part 11 of Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations. So within those requirements, pulled out some of the major requirements that are activated. Everything in the black here has been historically part of Niagara. Just in general, the audit trail is historical data and enforcing data security, having a process for deactivating users, enforcing those standard operating procedures. That was all part of it, but really this unique identifier piece to manipulate and have an electronic signature was missing. So we added that. Going to getting started here, really you want to think about your deployment. Just in the general sense, the supported deployments we have, I'll start on the right, a standalone JACE you can license with any number of points for their point packs. And then it's also a standalone supervisor on the left. You can think about just any sort of Ethernet IP device that might be connected to the supervisor. You don't need the JACE, so you would assign those points at the Niagara supervisor level. In the middle is where I guess some complexity arises, that you would have 2 licenses, one on a supervisor and one on a JACE. If you have some sort of serial connections into the JACE or IP connections into the JACE, you would secure those points in the JACE, and then you can still view them through a supervisor, through a web browser and whatnot, but the actual application needs to reside and the users have to have permissions in those synced in those controllers to make those changes. And then a Niagara supervisor could also have an IP type device directly into it that they can manipulate IP-based points as e-sign points. The only really thing that we wouldn't support is anything coming through the Niagara network cannot be e-signed at the supervisor level. And if you kind of go through the user guide and maybe a few more examples, we can show what that actually looks like in practice. So whatever point packs or unlimited, for either the JACE or the Niagara Fort. There is this, the training, as I mentioned, is available on TridiumUniversity.com. Great place to get started. There is technical support services that can be purchased. This e-sign services part, if you have access to Tridium's price list, you can see that part. So e-signature parts can be either ordered or they're extended to the organization that has a direct relationship with Tridium. If you want to, you can contact your Niagara sales account representative, order through them. And as I mentioned, it's also available on the Niagara marketplace. So many ways to get started. I included just some of the part numbers here as part of the slides, just for they'll be distributed to everyone. Okay, so I'm going to jump over here to my Workbench and kind of show just some basic configuration of the electronic signature and how to get started. I have a couple stations here on my supervisor running locally on my machine, and I have a JACE as well, but I'm going to look at a station I have here, and I'm going to take a quick step back actually and look at the download and just kind of show what else is in here, because I think that's actually a little more important right now. The software modules themselves, you have four. I showed these. You have 412. There's 4 modules. This kind of, I guess, comes into play if you're talking about installation qualification and whatnot. So these modules for a supervisor obviously have to be put into the modules folder within Niagara. You know, you could check that they're there, or you could check in the my modules, but for that they're in the JACE as well. Oh, you know what? I am on disconnect from my connect to my JACE. There we go. So in the software manager, you can identify that those modules have all been installed and they are the correct up-to-date version. While that loads in the background, oh, wow, there it goes. So just that. Up to date. So I can validate that these are in fact one of those part of the release of version 2.3 on my JACE. So going back to this download, where'd it go? So part of the release includes all these documents. So the guide here, the signature application guide, will walk you through how to set up, how to copy in all those modules, how to set up a new station, how to install the service and all that. I'll kind of walk through some of these reason sets, configuring roles and categories are also part of, or very important in setting up some user security. But when we go and talk about CFR Part 11, we have some other documents in here that are part of the download. As far as installation qualification, we've asked for these checklists. These are artifacts that somebody can sign off on, that they have the right version. They verified who it is, who it was reviewed by, these sorts of operational qualification checklists I have here to make sure that all the things are set up correctly as far as we would have you enforce those individual users with roles, who this is checked by. So in the event of an audit, you have these pre-made checklists from Tridium that you can fill out and hand over to any sort of auditor. There's also just in here a couple other things as far as the interpretation against the individual subsection and parts, like what is the application's equivalent or compatibility with those requirements, how it's done. Something like biomet, there are mentions of biometrics. So just it's not, we would say that's not applicable here. So just to some additional things as far as you might need to configure. We also hired a third-party auditor to conduct a gap analysis as far as what is the developer responsibility, who has to enforce specific things for standard operating procedures. We provide the tools, but it really, just like any Niagara system, relies on the system integrator to install things securely, and it requires the end users to follow best practices and methods of procedures, a lot of which I will break in my demo here. So do as I say, not as I do, because I think I'm logged in as admin right now, which is probably a big no-no as far as signing points. So to the application also, and these are also available in this document repository we call the Niagara Resource Center, docs.niagara-community.com. You can scroll down, you can see professional services. There's some FAQs on here as well, but those qualification checklists are there. The interpretation, the analysis that I mentioned, and as well as the user guide can all be found here, as well as the guides for configuring roles and categories if you need to check that out. So now that I have Workbench open, I can come in here and see that within my configuration, I can drag in. So if you're looking for a sidebar in Workbench, palette opens up this palette here. If I didn't have electronic signature already open, I could search for it, and it provides me with a few things here. The e-signature application is dragged in to the station space. I'll put it under configuration. And from here, I can start to configure everything from those reason sets, the customer information. So if I want to make a new reason set as far as, why I want to change things, I could say some HVAC reasons that I might want to change things, some pre-configured reasons, power reset, or what other reason, conditions normal, back to normal. Really, these can be whatever, and as many reasons as you like that you can add. If I want to look at the property sheet here, I'm going to look at the property sheet here and look at my customer. Say, hey, what is, I'm going to say Tridium manufacturing. Let's just make up 3951 West Air, and phone numbers, contact person name. Let's make that me. Any sort of information that you want to add, the contact person's phone number to have in the system. Within the zones, you can change the zone name. I can add multiple zones, change the zone location, zone name. Not feeling very creative right now, I'm sorry. But if I want to look at the zone itself, now here's where I actually start to set up the points. So much like any other point query dialog, I can have just an org chooser and go through my points here. Let's say I have a boiler system here that I need to, look at the differential pressure set points, I just select the whole thing, these points come up, and if I want to just select commands, I don't really need to secure supply temperatures, especially if they're read-only type things. I can if I want to, but I select multiple ones. Oh, there's a command. I'm just going to add a single signature. If I want to add pre-configured reason sets, they all pop up here. I can add, so anytime I go to manipulate those, they'll be part of changing the set point here. So I can leave these as single, or I can highlight them all and add a dual signature. I'm going to just add a dual signature to this boiler command so that now anytime I want to manipulate this boiler command, I'm going to have two people sign off on it. All these are just going to require a single signature. Boiler, all right, boiler one, we'll have two, boiler two, we'll have one. All right, so now those points are designated as eSign secure. If I want to look at back to my AX property sheet, I can see in here now I am licensed for 500 eSign points. When I chose those points, I grabbed 30 of them and added to them. So now I can see my used point count here. A couple other things that you can configure within here is just the history name that's created for the secured point history. As far as what you want to do with the records, I want probably an unlimited record. I mean, I can export these to the records to, I can email them off as CSVs. I can create up a file system that I want to store them on locally, so I don't have to keep them in the Niagara Workbench, but the records will be retained. Or I could set up a third-party SQL. I could set up a cloud SQL database environment that I can dump all these records in. But just as far as what's stored in the history space in the application, I can configure here. Within here, I can look at the remote authentication. So if I want to send off to somebody else who might not be local, I can store the remote requests in the BOG file so that they persist. Should be enabled. And as well as adding in here, I can manipulate the reason sets for alarms. I can pick and choose in my protected console recipient. If you're familiar with the console recipient, this is just eSignature's version of that to enforce those signatures when you go to manipulate those alarms that are eSign secured. So can come back in here, manipulate, add different reasons, create different reason sets, but I'm going to leave well enough alone now to actually show what it looks like when you come in and try to manipulate a point. So within my BACnet systems, I got a boiler command, and I want to change some things within it. So if you look at the slot sheet, you'll see, all of these emergency active, change, and set are all hidden slots now. And what was added to the point when it became a eSign point are all of the same, but with authentication. So these action slots are now present when you go to try to manipulate. So if I want to look at the point itself, it's enabled. Let's say I want to action set emergency inactivate with authentication. So in here, I have my reason sets that I configured, the back to normal or power reset. If I want to say other, I have this text field opens up. I can say whatever I want. I'm logged in as admin right now, but if I had another account set up, which I do on my other station, so I'll show that. But I can manipulate here and go into the other, but I'm just going to put in my username and password here. I didn't manipulate the legal statement. That was something that you can do in the eSign configuration window. The default says I am the user identified above. I work for Tridium Manufacturing, notified me that it has signed the above user, blah, 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 blah. It's my written and signature comments I can add. And then I sign it. And it's okay. Now it's disabled overridden at 1. And very simply, record is created and where are we? History. Building 1. Secure points history is the name of it. Overridden at 1. Let's go to the timestamp here. This is the text field. You see my comments, the primary signer. Oh, I stole the station from Kevin Mamachek. And the point, what the operation was, some different comments here. So I'm going to go back to this station over here and look at a few other things. I have some additional users already configured with roles in here. So this user is an admin. I was trying to play off of the ALCS series, if anybody's a baseball fan, but Aaron Judge versus Verlander. And within the user service now, when you have the e-signature application, the users add this e-signature role configuration. So a level 2 authenticator role needs to be added for anybody to sign that second level. So both of these have that ability. I'm going to, let's go pull up my station here. I'm going to log in as Judge. Oh, so if I go to something like my air handler here, I know this is a dual point. So let's say I want to set this zone set point. Any sort of reason here, a new reason for changing it. I can set it to 71. And here, if I wanted to, I can, probably bad practice, but I can say, put my admin password in here and you'll see the legal statement updates and I can sign it as somebody else. So sign it as 1. If I want to, either use this level 2 signature, let's say Verlander standing over my shoulder, and I can sign 2. And now if I go into my, my secure points history, I could see that the new value is at 71. What was the reason for change? Who was the primary signer? This is very bad practice. I don't have the full name of the admin. I should have left it as Judge for this intents and purposes here, but you can see the full name associated with the username. I didn't add any comments, but what point was changed, what operation happened, and it is all stored in the secure points history. So now what I can do is, let's say I want to pull a report. So in my report service, I already have an export source linked up to an email. I'm sending just my secure point history. Let's just generate that now because I feel like it's going to take maybe 30 seconds or so to get through to my email here. And that's assuming I'm back off the VPN, because our lovely VPN blocks the email service. So yeah, it requires, pre-configured email recipient. Oh, here you go. What came in at 11:35, my secure points history. I want to look at it. I just have it set as a CSV, and you can see, hey, the 71 value, the new reason, admin, Verlander. Within Niagara 2, I also wanted to show off, the remote email. So let's go ahead and go back to that same point. Is that it? I am logged. Let's go back to the web browser, as more and more views are going to be going this way anyway. Let's try to stay in here. In that same point, I'm going to say set with authentication, and I'm going to change it just to 75. I need to add reasons sets to this. So I'm just going to sign. Okay, this needs to be changed. All right, so I hereby say I want to change that set point. Let's say they're not over my shoulder. So I'm going to send this remote, send request. It's been, not to admin, but all right, I want to send it to Verlander. That's going to come in via email. Might as well show off here too in the electronic signature. Where's property sheet? This e-sign acknowledgement that you can manipulate things here, right? So the customer name is being generated. The username of whoever is signing it will be there. Also, email configuration. So for should I send remote request emails, what's in the subject of the email and what's in the body of the email. I included this just link to hyperlink in as part of the email. Have this set up as my Gmail, unfortunately. Just, yes, it's me. Log into my Gmail. So come on in here. I could see I sent it to my Verlander I set up with my Gmail account, not my Outlook account. So I can, I'm getting a request from a user here. So I can log in here, and it will take me to my remote authentication, except I logged in as not Verlander because I'm already logged in. Capsule. Yeah, there we go. And if I come to that remote authentication view, right, you can have this be the default view, but I could see here that the request is pending for me. If I hadn't been logged in on my browser, it would have taken me to the login screen and I would have logged in as Verlander from the start, but I had already been logged in as admin, so it didn't persist for me here. But if I want to have an auto refresh in case they keep coming in, but I can either accept or reject, say which station, who was the level 1, hey, this needs to be changed. I can see what the requested value is. All that good stuff is in here. So I could say, all right, I approve as the level 2. I approve, which I guess. So now, approved requests, you can see what the new value is. I can go to the histories and, and see my secure points history, all that happened, who was approved, the remote authenticator approved. So in there, I guess the only other 2 things I wanted to show, make sure I got done and I'll leave enough time for questions and poking around the station if we was ability to set an alarm. I'm going to go back to Workbench, and I have that point. It is e-sign secured. I can add an alarm extension. Just range alarm. Let's say high limit and enable. Let's say the high. Send this to my e-sign alarms because I set up a different alarm class here. Look at in my alarm service, I have a protected alarm console already in here. I have an alarm class I created called e-sign alarms, and they're routed to this email recipient and protected console recipient. So let me go ahead and just put that 1 point in a fault. So if I set it, put it at 85. Reason. Again, very bad practices here. But just trying to show as much as I can quickly. Okay, so in my protected console, you'll see this fault here, the set point. It's out of range. I can see some notes, add some notes if I want. I'm going to acknowledge here, and it will have the prompt if I want to set my reasons to acknowledge this alarm. We were expecting this. Oh. All right, so now the alarm is acknowledged. Let's see. So that protected alarm console is in there, and as well as I have these e-sign alarms, just like any other alarms, can be routed, and you can see the default, the state, unact. Well, that was generated when. And so, and then last piece, here we go. I'm going to dismiss that. Come into my VPN so I can connect to my LDAP server here. I have authenticated. So now I should be able to look at and show my user service. Let's delete this user to log out. Change my user. Got that just cached there. It's no longer in my user service, but log in with my LDAP user. And so this should authenticate against the server. And now you can see I've logged in, and it will recreate automatically the LDAP service. We'll add this user back in that I had deleted based on that LDAP configuration I have set up. By default, I had it set to add this admin role, but I know I need to come in and add this level 2 for myself here. I have admin credentials, so I can do that. If I want to go back to my home page and I can say, oh, I'm going to fix this, right? Whatever reason. And I can enter my password as an LDAP user, and actually LDAP can sign now. It takes a second because it actually, I guess, does the the password not against the local user service, but against a server that's sitting somewhere else. So I can just sign it here. Sign to, signed, okay, and oh, there it goes. I was like, oh, the one last thing I was going to show almost didn't work, but it just took a second. All right. So I definitely see that there's a bubble above the Q&A. So I'm going to just wrap up real quick by just by pointing out some of the different stuff on University that's still out there, all the feature set updates, all the getting to know, all the updated resources. Tridium Talks, if you go to the Tridium.com website under services and support, you can find events, see things like the new wire sheet, HTTP client driver. If you want to look at Niagara Pro tips, I'm sure James and Kevin will want me to make this e-sign into a pro tip series. So, hopefully that'll be in the pipeline. We'll continue to add videos to YouTube series. We'll take requests as well. So questions? Yes, recording will be available. Yes, the slides will be available. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thanks, Kyle. I've been tracking some Q&A, so let's see if we can get some of these in before the top of the hour. One question we have is, can you force user to type in the username and not display the username in the dropdown?
Can you force the user to type
in the username and not?
The secondary authentication I think right now is just the drop down. The if you want to manipulate the point itself with authentication, this I can write in, I can force whatever username. So this could be any LDAP user that's not even set up yet. If they have the proper permissions and it's set up on the prototype, you can add that username and password here. But the level 2 will be a drop down of who is a level 2 signer.
Okay. Another question is, I see single sign-on. Will that? Oh, that jumped. Will that
the help file? Yeah, there is
help file tell me how to set it up?
Yeah, there's a station in the station security guide I followed to set that up. That was kind of just left. I was playing around with the station. I had set that up in the authentication service when I was messing around with LDAP as well in here. But yeah, there is help documentation on how to set that up, and I can help too. Where's my?
Another question is there what?
I was just gonna say, make sure my email's there. Sorry. I can hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. Is there a way for a remote signer to receive an email and sign off and acknowledge a change request without having to sign into the station?
You believe you have to log in and use the remote signer view. There's no currently respond to email unless Gungeon wants to tell me differently. Praveen.
How are points properties protected, like alarm limits and alarm classes?
How are points properties protected, like alarm limits and alarm classes? Points properties protected, like, oh, okay. Guess the properties would have to likely either be restricted through categories, and you would have some sort of set point you could change that's linked into those properties. Some sort of string point that you would secure would have to be, I guess, the workflow today.
All right, here's another question. Is this only for application users, or can one use the DNS network account user?
Network account user. So today it works with the default user, the digest authentication, and the LDAP authentication. I'm not sure. As long as they're in the user service of Niagara, it will be able to authenticate be able to make those changes with authentication.
Okay. Is this service available in the cloud?
If you consider a cloud-hosted VM the cloud, that would be my. You want to boot up a Windows station in Azure, but there is no dedicated cloud service hosted that has this, I would say.
Is a hash created of reports prior to routing to recipients?
That I don't know the answer to. I'm going to have to ask. Get back to you. I'm not sure who asked that, but I'll write their name down.
Yeah, that was Paul upstairs, by the way.
Oh. Oh well, yeah. There you go.
Let's see, a couple more. Do you use the standard email port, or is it a different port to allow in the enterprise firewall?
I use whatever Gmail standard port was. I can't use it on Honeywell's IT or on Honeywell's network. I have to either be home or use my phone as a hotspot. It is blocked on our network. I'm not sure who asked that. But you can change the port if I look at my email service. Okay.
Okay, I think I have one more question, and then we can wrap it up. But can you make the comment bigger in configuration during the alarm acknowledge?
The comment bigger. I think I believe it's fixed. In tools, there's I haven't tried this, but the font size you can make large and then restart the workbench and check, but that's something I might have to circle back on.
Okay, perfect. And I will I'll download these questions and
Okay.
follow up with any that might have come through.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure to respond to everybody.
Awesome.
Well, if anybody wants to proactively, that's my email. Feel free to reach out with any questions, anything you want to, see, or specific screenshots or something maybe in a service that I didn't open. You want to see what mine looks like. I don't mind sharing. This recording will be shared. Slides will be posted. So feel free. I'm always available.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.